Philip, hands where I can see him.
Oh, wow, the whole squad for little old me. I'm honored.
The stage crashes the shell company, $4 million is documented.
This is Philip Patako, a former chiropractor whose license was stripped for misconduct over a decade ago. What you are about to see is where the second chapter of that story ends.
A strong, wow, if it's an honor, then it must be true. Can't argue with a good
5 years running it from the back of your own clinic.
Just so we're clear, how much trouble are we talking?
He would not get to finish that sentence. Within 48 hours, Morris County prosecutors would seize his bank records, his clinic files, and a paper trail running back to a license he had not legally held in nearly 2 decades. $3,991,812. 60 months of staged collisions and phantom treatments. One licensed chiropractor paid to put his name on a clinic, Philip Patako, actually ran from behind a curtain. The investigation would eventually expose every layer of the fiction and every dollar of the insurance money he had washed through a shell company in his own home office. Quick question. Have you ever wondered how your auto insurance premium actually gets set? Drop a comment with what your last rate hike looked like, because cases like this one are the reason. And if you're not subscribed yet, fix that now. We cover the white-collar accountability stories that everyone else lets slip through. Philip Patako was born in 1954 in the working-class half of Paterson, New Jersey, the second son of a tile setter from Calabria and a school cafeteria cook. The family lived in a narrow 2-story on East 18th Street, 10 minutes from the Great Falls. His father owned a battered Ford pickup, a set of margin trowels, and a reputation for charging fairly and finishing on time. His mother kept the family ledger in a green spiral notebook on top of the refrigerator, and she balanced it every Sunday after Mass. Philip was the second son, which in that household meant he was expected to do something with his hands, but to do it indoors. His older brother went into the tile trade. Philip was steered toward a profession. He was a quiet teenager. Teachers at Eastside High School described him in evaluations as polite, attentive, and unusually careful with detail. A guidance counselor in his junior year wrote that Philip appeared to think 2 or 3 moves ahead, which suited him for any field involving systems and records. That note would prove almost prophetic. He graduated in 1972 and enrolled at William Patterson the following fall on a partial scholarship and a tuition loan his father co-signed. He studied biology. He worked weekends at a small storefront butcher shop on Market Street in Patterson, breaking down quarters of beef and learning, for the first time, how a small business actually moved money. He kept his own paper ledger of tips and side cash in a notebook he hid behind a row of medical textbooks. He was 20 years old. In 1977, he was accepted to the New York Chiropractic College, which at the time was housed in a converted hotel in Glen Head, Long Island. Tuition was $1,100 a trimester. He drove a 1971 Chevy Nova back and forth across the George Washington Bridge, sleeping some weeks on a fold-out couch in his uncle's basement in Queens to save money on gas. He passed the National Board examinations in 1981 on his first attempt. He came home to New Jersey with a doctorate in chiropractic, a state license dated October of that year, and roughly $400 in his checking account. He rented a single treatment room above a pharmacy in Bloomfield, painted the walls a pale yellow, and put his name on the door in adhesive vinyl letters, Dr. Philip A. Patako. The pharmacist downstairs sent him his first patient, a UPS driver with a herniated disc. The fee was $35, paid in cash. By 1985, he had moved to a larger space on Bloomfield Avenue. By 1989, he employed 2 staff members, a receptionist named Linda and a massage therapist named Karen. He married Donna in the spring of 1986. They bought a modest split level in Cedar Grove with a 30-year mortgage at a rate that would have made any modern borrower weep. They had 2 children. Philip joined the local Knights of Columbus. He coached a CYO basketball team for 2 seasons. From the outside, it was an entirely ordinary suburban success story. The problems began quietly. By the mid-1990s, Philip Patako's practice was generating more revenue than his clinical hours could plausibly account for. State investigators would later note an unusual pattern of billings tied to motor vehicle insurance claims. Adjustments coded for the same patient on the same day across multiple visit notes. Treatment plans extended weeks past the point of clinical justification. A handful of patients whose injuries appeared and reappeared in the records on a near-monthly schedule. The Board of Chiropractic Examiners opened a file on him in 1998. It took 4 years. In 2002, after a contested administrative hearing, the New Jersey State Board of Chiropractic Examiners revoked Philip Patako's license to practice. The findings were extensive: insurance fraud, improper billing, false documentation, and what the board called a sustained pattern of conduct demonstrating a willful disregard for the standards of the profession. He was 48 years old. He was barred from practicing chiropractic in the state of New Jersey, and the revocation was made permanent on appeal. He did not return to school. He did not change careers. He did, however, change strategy. To understand what Philip Patako built between 2010 and 2015, you have to understand the specific machinery of automobile insurance in New Jersey. New Jersey is a no-fault state. Every licensed driver is required to carry personal injury protection coverage, known as PIP, which pays medical bills after a collision regardless of who caused it. The minimum coverage is $15,000. The standard policy carries up to $250,000. The system was designed to spare accident victims the burden of suing for routine medical care. The system also created, almost by accident, a river of insurance money flowing toward any clinic that could plausibly claim to be treating crash injuries. In a normal arrangement, the river flows through legitimate channels. An accident occurs. The victim sees a doctor. The doctor diagnoses soft tissue injury, prescribes a course of chiropractic care, and the chiropractor bills the insurance carrier under standard procedure codes. The carrier pays. The victim recovers. The premiums of every other policyholder in the state quietly absorb the cost. The system runs because the volume of legitimate claims is large enough to make individual audits expensive and impractical. Carriers settle. They pay. They raise rates the following year. The weakness in the system is exactly that volume. Insurance investigators in New Jersey at the time were estimated to review fewer than 3% of PIP claims for indicators of fraud. As long as the paperwork was tidy, the procedure codes were standard, and the billing chiropractor held an active state license, the money moved. Nobody at the carrier had any reason to ask whether the chiropractor signing the file had ever met the patient. Nobody asked whether the patient had actually been in a real collision. Nobody asked whether the man running the clinic had ever held a license at all. Philip Patako understood this machinery from the inside. He had practiced inside it for 20 years before his license was pulled. He knew which codes drew scrutiny and which moved freely. He knew how long a treatment plan could plausibly stretch before a carrier flagged it. He knew that every signature, every chart note, every billing form needed to come from a licensed practitioner. But he also knew that the license on the form did not have to belong to the man writing the checks at the end of the month. The state of New Jersey had taken away his license. It had not taken away his knowledge of how the system bled. The South Orange Trauma and Rehab Center opened its doors in the spring of 2010. On paper, it was owned and operated by a licensed New Jersey chiropractor whose name appeared on the lease, on the state filings, on the insurance billings, and on the door. The doctor was real. The license was real. The patients, on most days, were not. Philip Patako had recruited the chiropractor through professional contacts. The arrangement was simple. The licensed doctor would put his name on every document the operation required. He would sign treatment notes. He would draw a salary. In exchange, he would not ask hard questions about who owned the building, who recruited the patients, who set the billing codes, or where the proceeds ended up. He was a straw owner. He was the legal fiction that allowed a barred practitioner to bill the New Jersey insurance market for 5 straight years. Patako controlled the operation through a second entity, an LLC he had registered under the name Medical Consulting Group. On paper, Medical Consulting Group provided administrative services to the clinic: patient recruitment, scheduling, marketing, billing support. the sort of back-office work that medical practices routinely outsource. In reality, Medical Consulting Group was the heart of the enterprise. It was the entity that recruited the patients. It was the entity that wired itself the proceeds. It was the entity that wrote the checks back to Philip and Donna Pataco's personal accounts. The patient recruitment was the part that made the whole thing illegal 3 different ways. Some of the people who walked through the clinic doors had been in real collisions and had been steered to the clinic by recruiters working on commission. Some had been in collisions that were not real at all. Investigators would eventually identify a roster of staged crashes. Minor low-speed impacts arranged in parking lots and at intersections in Essex and Union counties, with 2 cooperating drivers, a list of pre-coached passengers, and a tow truck called to make the scene look right for the police report. Once a patient was inside the system, the rest ran on autopilot. The straw owner chiropractor would conduct an evaluation, real or perfunctory, depending on the day, and would establish a treatment plan. The treatment plan would typically extend across 30 to 45 visits, billed in standard increments. Some patients did receive actual chiropractic care. Some patients showed up, signed in, and left. Some patients never set foot in the building, but their charts grew anyway, populated with the kind of routine soft tissue narrative that drew no attention from any carrier reading the file. The billings flowed out, the reimbursements flowed in. The clinic's checking account at a Valley National branch in South Orange received deposits from a list of insurance carriers that read like a directory of the New Jersey auto market: GEICO, Allstate, Liberty Mutual, Progressive, New Jersey Manufacturers, Travelers, Nationwide. Over the 5 years of the scheme, the total reached $3,991,812, almost $4 million. The bulk of it never stayed in the clinic. Once the reimbursements landed, Pataco wired the proceeds to Medical Consulting Group LLC. From the LLC's account, he wrote checks back to himself, to his wife, and to a series of cash withdrawals he made in person at branches in Morris and Essex counties. Investigators would later document withdrawal slips in the tens of thousands of dollars, drawn in person, signed in his own hand. The home in Kinnelon was paid down. A new vehicle appeared in the driveway. Donna Pataco's accounts received transfers in increments small enough to attract no individual scrutiny and large enough, in aggregate, to draw a forensic accountant's eye when one finally arrived. Nobody at the South Orange clinic ever questioned the arrangement out loud. The straw owner chiropractor cashed his salary checks. The billing staff did their work. The recruiters delivered patients. The carriers paid. For 5 years, nobody looked closely enough to notice that the man who actually ran the clinic had not been allowed to practice chiropractic in New Jersey since the second Bush administration. The thing about a no-fault state is that the carriers eventually compare notes. By 2014, fraud investigators at 2 separate insurance companies had independently flagged the South Orange Trauma and Rehab Center for what their internal memoranda described as an anomalous claims pattern. The clinic was billing roughly 4 times the volume that comparable single-doctor practices in the same zip code generated. Its average treatment plan ran nearly twice as long as the regional median. Its patients tended to share a small list of referring attorneys and a smaller list of accident reconstruction details that, on close reading, repeated almost verbatim across unrelated files. The flag itself was not enough. Insurance fraud units fire off thousands of flags a year, and the great majority of them get filed and forgotten because the cost of prosecuting exceeds the value of the suspected fraud. What pushed the South Orange case across the line was a phone call. In the late spring of 2014, a former patient walked into the Morris County Prosecutor's office and asked to speak to someone about a clinic she had been treated at the previous year. She had not been in a car accident. She had been recruited by a man who promised her $300 in cash to attend a series of appointments and to sign a stack of forms she did not read. She had taken the $300. She had attended 4 of the scheduled appointments and skipped the rest. She had received, in the mail several months later, a notice from her own insurance carrier showing that her policy had been billed for over $11,000 in chiropractic care. She had panicked, called the recruiter, and been told to stop asking questions. She did not stop asking questions. She walked into the prosecutor's office instead. The Morris County Prosecutor's Office Insurance Fraud Unit opened a formal investigation in June of 2014. They obtained subpoenas for the clinic's billing records, for the bank statements of Medical Consulting Group LLC, for the personal accounts of Philip and Donna Pataco. They placed the clinic under intermittent surveillance. They identified 6 additional cooperating witnesses, 3 of whom had participated in staged collisions and were willing, in exchange for cooperation agreements, to testify about how the arrangements had been set up. The investigation ran for 14 months in near total silence. Pataco had no idea any of it was happening. The forensic accounting was the part that broke the case open. Investigators worked backward from the bank deposits, tracing the path of every dollar that had moved from a carrier into the clinic's operating account and outward from there. The pattern was clean enough to chart on a single page: insurance carrier to clinic, clinic to Medical Consulting Group LLC, Medical Consulting Group LLC to Philip Pataco, to Donna Pataco, and to cash. There was no legitimate consulting work product. There were no invoices supporting the transfers. There was no business reason for Medical Consulting Group LLC to exist at all, except as a wash cycle for fraudulently obtained insurance reimbursements. The straw owner chiropractor cracked early. Confronted with the bank records, the treatment notes, and the testimony of the cooperating patients, he agreed to a cooperation deal of his own. He told investigators in a recorded interview that he had been recruited by Pataco in late 2009, that he had understood from the start that his role was nominal, and that he had signed every document Pataco placed in front of him. He could identify Pataco's handwriting on treatment notes that the licensed doctor himself had never reviewed. He could describe meetings at the clinic in which Pataco gave direction to billing staff. He could name the recruiters who had brought patients in. The smoking gun was not a single document. It was the architecture of the operation itself. A barred chiropractor running a clinic he could not legally own, through a licensed proxy he had paid to act as a front, with a shell LLC laundering proceeds back to his own home office. The fiction was elaborate. The fiction was also entirely traceable, once anyone bothered to follow the paper. Investigators executed search warrants on the clinic and on the Pataco residence in Kinnelon in the fall of 2015. They seized patient files, billing computers, financial records, and a locked filing cabinet in Pataco's home office that contained, among other things, copies of bank statements for accounts held in his wife's name that he had not disclosed on any tax filing in 5 years. They found checkbooks for Medical Consulting Group LLC stored next to checkbooks for the Pataco household. They found handwritten notes in Pataco's own hand, listing dollar figures next to patient initials and dates. The figures matched the deposit records line for line. The case was now exactly the kind of case that prosecutors love. Documentary evidence, cooperating witnesses, a defendant whose prior license revocation made the criminal intent almost impossible to argue with a straight face. The Morris County Prosecutor's Office presented the matter to a grand jury in early 2016. We're heading into the moment investigators finally walked through his door. If this case is making you think about your own auto premium and where that money actually goes, drop a comment letting us know what state you're watching from, and subscribe. These are the cases that quietly cost every honest driver in this country money, and somebody has to keep covering them. Investigators arrived at the Pataco residence on a Tuesday morning in October of 2015. The front lawn in Kinnelon was still wet from the previous night's rain. 2 unmarked vehicles parked along the curb. A detective from the Morris County Insurance Fraud Unit walked up the brick steps to the front door and rang the bell. Philip Pataco answered in a navy zip-up sweater and reading glasses, a coffee mug still in his hand. The detective identified himself. He held out a folded search warrant. Pataco read it on the doorstep, slowly, without saying a word, while 3 additional investigators walked up the path behind the lead detective and waited. "Mr. Pataco, we have a warrant to search the residence. We also have a list of questions for you." You're not under arrest at this moment, but you have a right to have an attorney present before you answer anything. I understand. Do you want to make any statement before we begin? Patako looked past the detective, at the unmarked car in the driveway, at the second team that was already moving toward the side entrance of the house. He set the coffee mug down on the small table by the door. He spoke in the careful, deliberate tone of a man who had spent a long time imagining this conversation and had not expected it on this particular Tuesday. I'd like to call my lawyer. The search ran for 6 hours. Investigators carried out 23 banker's boxes of records, 3 computers, a desktop tower from the home office, and the locked filing cabinet that had been forced open with a pry bar after Patako declined to produce the key. Donna Patako sat in the kitchen with a victim advocate for most of the morning. Philip Patako sat on the front step in the sweater and the reading glasses, speaking only when his attorney arrived and only in the presence of counsel. He was not arrested that day. The arrest came in the form of a phone call from his attorney's office 4 months later, after the grand jury had returned an indictment. He surrendered voluntarily at the Morris County Courthouse on a Wednesday morning in February of 2016, was fingerprinted and photographed, and was released the same day on a posted bond. The indictment named 23 counts. The lead charge was second-degree money laundering, a charge that in New Jersey carries a presumption of incarceration, even for a defendant with no prior criminal record. The supporting charges included second-degree official misconduct, second-degree theft by deception, third-degree practicing chiropractic without a license, and a litany of related counts tied to specific transactions, specific patients, and specific staged collisions. The case was assigned to Judge Thomas J. Critchley of Morris County Superior Court. Patako's defense attorney filed the motions any competent defense attorney files in a case of this size. He moved to suppress portions of the search. He moved to sever counts. He moved to challenge the cooperating witnesses. The motions were heard, argued, and largely denied. The case was scheduled for trial. 12 weeks before jury selection, Patako pleaded guilty. The plea agreement covered 3 counts: money laundering in the second degree, official misconduct in the second degree, practicing chiropractic without a license in connection with a criminal enterprise. The remaining counts were dismissed in exchange for the plea. The agreement called for a recommended sentence of 7 years in state prison, restitution in the amount of $3.5 million, and forfeiture of remaining assets traceable to the enterprise. Patako accepted the agreement on the record. He answered the judge's allocution questions in a steady voice. He admitted, in open court, that he had owned and controlled the South Orange Trauma and Rehab Center, despite the revocation of his license, that he had used a licensed chiropractor as a straw owner, and that he had laundered the proceeds through Medical Consulting Group LLC. Sentencing took place in 2019. The courtroom on the second floor of the Morris County Courthouse was modestly full. A representative from one of the defrauded insurance carriers read a brief statement on the record, describing the indirect cost to honest policyholders across the state. The former straw owner chiropractor, who had received a substantially reduced sentence in exchange for his cooperation, was not present. Donna Patako sat in the second row in a dark coat, hands folded. Judge Critchley spoke before imposing sentence. He addressed Patako directly, without raising his voice. Dr. Patako, and I use that title only in the most technical sense, because the state of New Jersey withdrew the right to use it from you in 2002. What you did was not the kind of impulsive fraud that occasionally lands in this courtroom. You were given a clear, formal, and final instruction by the licensing board of this state 17 years ago. You ignored it. You spent the next 15 years building an elaborate apparatus designed specifically to circumvent it. You hired another professional to lend you his license. You created a shell company to wash the money. You billed nearly $4 million to insurance carriers for treatment you had no legal right to direct. Every driver in this state pays a slightly higher premium because of conduct like yours. The sentence I impose today reflects the seriousness of that conduct and the deliberateness with which you carried it out. He sentenced Philip Patako to 7 years in state prison. He ordered restitution in the amount of $3.5 million. He ordered the permanent forfeiture of Pataco's interest in Medical Consulting Group LLC and any successor entity. He noted, on the record, that the original license revocation in 2002 stood and would never again be reconsidered. Pataco was processed and transferred to Southwood State Prison in Bridgeton, a Level 3 correctional facility in Cumberland County, where he would serve the bulk of his sentence in the general population. The South Orange Trauma and Rehab Center closed permanently within 30 days of the indictment. The straw owner chiropractor surrendered his license voluntarily as part of his cooperation agreement and is barred from reapplying. The home in Kinnelon was placed under a restitution lien. Donna Pataco was not charged. The insurance carriers recovered a portion of the money through the restitution order. The rest was absorbed into the premiums of every honest driver in the state of New Jersey, exactly as it had been all along. This case was elaborate, but the case on the right-hand side of your screen right now is something else entirely. Click it.